volunteers who will be participating in this event. We want to make this as participatory and engaging as possible. So, without further ado, please welcome our speakers, our special guests today, Diana Roach, Glen Blumhorst, Paul Summers. Diana will introduce our volunteers.
Yes, so we have a lot of volunteers joining us today, and I want to recognize, Camille Assad, Nino Adams, Elizabeth Alderson, Bruce Bailey, Bernard Cujo, Abubakar Diane, Huiying Johnson, Kabita, Bryce Malsbury, Masuda Khan Mambatova, Usha Palana's mommy, Ross and Kate Penhaligon, and Mark Wade. I know there's probably other volunteers joining us as well, so just know that I couldn't get everybody's name, but welcome. We're happy to have you.
We also have with us today our partners from USAID, Peggy Carlson, Jeff Levine, who himself actually was a longtime ACDI VOCA employee and team member, John Peters, and Evania Robles. We are so happy to have here also our Farmer to Farmer country directors, Mira Arinova, Makrita Vijan, Nadir Ibrahim Zoda, and Magda Minamte. Diana?
We also have several former staff, Bob Cohen, Brian Foster, Cassie Rademacher, George Rowland, Jordana Popovic, and Yelena Sabanova.
And finally, our vast and fabulous volunteer support system, ACDI VOCA leadership, home office and country project teams, our support departments, and many, many more. Welcome, everybody. So we begin today with a journey through time. You will see I have this little time machine here. In putting together this event, I was reminded about just how extensive, impactful, and far-reaching our volunteer programs have been and still are. Today, I want to bring back some memories, but also focus on how they bring us into the future. So let's start with 1970 and 1971, when the first 3 assignments were conducted in Chile, Jamaica, and Zaire, following the establishment of VOCA, or Volunteers for Overseas Cooperative Assistance. In 1972, VOCA fields its first volunteer to Bolivia, and by 2011 implements over 500 assignments in that country. So today we have with us Glen Blumhorst, the president of the National Peace Corps Association. He himself was a country representative and chief of party in South America, and previously served as volunteer recruiter and manager of the California Regional Recruitment Office, as well as the Columbia, Missouri office. He was also a volunteer in Guatemala. So today, Glen will talk about innovative volunteer programs in Latin America and the Caribbean. Welcome, Glen.
Thank you so much, Oya, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm really delighted and honored to be back among old friends here at ACDI VOCA. It's been quite a few years, so the emphasis on friends, not on old, just to mind you. And I just want to thank you, Oya, for organizing this event, and I want to congratulate ACDI VOCA for 50 years of volunteer programs. It's quite an impressive history of volunteerism led by this organization. Shout out also to CJ, your president, for continuing that volunteer spirit at ACDI VOCA, and especially I know he has a fond connection with the Peace Corps community itself. I think it was his niece who served in the Peace Corps and who he visited while she was serving. And thanks to ACDI VOCA for being a sponsor of our Peace Corps Connect annual conference earlier this year. And we wouldn't have an event like this without just a tribute to Charles Cox. And he was my boss for 10 years while I was in Bolivia, and couldn't have asked for a better person to work with and a better boss. Not because he only visited me once during those 10 years, but just because he gave us the latitude and the flexibility and the creativity to really take programs where we could go with them, and really just is a legacy, if you will, at ACDI VOCA and in the volunteer community. So my first experience with the Farmer to Farmer program actually was as a Peace Corps volunteer in Guatemala, where I served from 1988 to 91. There was a volunteer, I believe his name was Dr. Jim Sappington from, I think, the University of Georgia. He came and worked through the Peace Corps partnership, I believe, with Farmer to Farmer, with Peace Corps volunteers to train us in horticultural seed production. So that would have been back around 1990, I suppose. So from that moment, I had a deep appreciation for the value of the Farmer to Farmer program in particular, and the volunteers that they brought to serve in Guatemala at that time. And I became familiar with VOCA through that. And when I returned back from my Peace Corps service after a few years in Guatemala, I walked in the doors of the VOCA recruiting office in Missouri to chat with folks there. And next thing I knew, I was sitting there recruiting volunteers. And one thing led to another, and eventually 18 years of service with ACDI VOCA. Wanted to just focus in on the Bolivia program in particular, where I served as a country representative for 10 years. I went to Bolivia for what was to be a 1.5-year stint, essentially to close out the program and wrap up the Farmer to Farmer work we were doing there, and left 10 years later with some pretty major projects underway and impressive work that we'd done over the years there. But one thing about the Bolivia program that distinguished us is that we had, since 1972, had over 38 years of continuous program presence in Bolivia, starting with the Cooperative Development Program that Olia mentioned there, that started in 1972 with the first assignment. And then leading up to Farmer to Farmer program from 86 to 2003, and then some volunteers even under the YCDF UNGAS activities leading up to 2011. Interesting thing about the program was that we were able to leverage funding from the government of Bolivia during the time, from monetized funds through PL 480, and those funds either helped underwrite the program at times when we didn't have funding from Farmer to Farmer, or it supplemented the funding of Farmer to Farmer or Cooperative Development Program during many years. I think from around 1993 to 2000 is when those funds were being used. Another distinguishing characteristic of our program there was the use of South-to-South volunteers. In particular, we started bringing Guatemalans to Bolivia. One of those worked in watershed management, and then later others were working with bioregulators, essentially organic pest controls. And the work that they did transferring their knowledge and use of bioregulators and water conservation, soil and water conservation techniques in Guatemala were tremendously helpful in Bolivia at a very practical level that they worked. We essentially replicated this kind of South-to-South approach by then later setting up a program based out of Brasilia to send Brazilians to Mozambique. Not large numbers there of volunteers going to Brazil, but we did capitalize on the language of Portuguese to be able to use Brazilians working in cooperative programs in Mozambique as well. As Olia mentioned, from 1972 up to around 2011, volunteers completed well over 500 assignments in Bolivia. At one time, we calculated that to be well over 15,000 person days of donated service throughout Bolivia. Something certainly to be proud of, and recognizing the tremendous voluntad, as we say, of the volunteers who contribute their time and their expertise to these programs. First project I looked up a little bit ago was in 1972 with Cebose, working on their financial systems. The volunteer was Laurie Lewton. She completed assignment number 1 with VOCA at the time in Bolivia. And Cebose is now one of the largest cement factory cooperatives in the country, and really has gone great places as a result of the support of volunteers over the years to the work that they do. I'll mention that Guatemala volunteer Edgar Palma, he completed, according to our records, volunteer assignment number 500 in Bolivia, working with Viva Verde watershed management. And unfortunately, Edgar passed away a few years ago. I've remained in touch with him over the years, but he was a legacy of his own in Guatemala for his tremendous work in soil and water conservation, as well as in Bolivia for the work that he did. He designed many of the manuals, many of the training manuals that were used by Peace Corps for watershed management as well. So definitely left his legacy in the work that he did as a volunteer. The strategy that we had there in Bolivia, I think as in many countries where there were multiple volunteer assignments, was short-term interventions in the context of long-term support to the counterparts that we worked with. So we developed long-term relationships with them. We developed plans for assistance over a few years or over multiple years, so that the assistance that we had was sustainable, and the support that we gave and the work that they did was sustainable over the longer term. And throughout that approach, and over the years of service through volunteers in Bolivia, we had well over 200 organizations that we counted among our partners in working with the farmer-to-farmer and cooperative development programs. And this network of organizations and the national recognition that we had as a volunteer-based program in Bolivia helped position us for the future. And as you know, then we were able to secure funding from USAID for major community development projects in the Yungas and the Japari, and became a large presence for USAID in Bolivia at that time. Finally, a couple of highlights that I just want to shout out here too. One is that one of our primary counterparts in Bolivia was the Eastern Chamber of Agriculture, the CAO as we call it, CAO in Spanish. At the time, they were able to field our volunteers all over the eastern part of the country. And at that time, the head of this organization was our own Walter Nunez, who I see recently is now working as Chief of Party for ACDI Avoca in Honduras. So Walter goes way back with us on our volunteer programs, and glad to see him at ACDI Avoca now working with us in Honduras there. Another organization that we worked with was called Probioma, and they developed bioregulators, essentially organic pest controls. We had a number of assignments that we did with them along the lines of production of bioregulators, mostly laboratory work, and this was done by our Guatemalan South-to-South volunteers. And then we recruited Jeff Levine to come down as a volunteer and do some business planning with them. And I think as a result of the work that the Guatemalans and Jeff did in the business planning work there, this organization has become tremendously successful since their founding in 1990, according to their website, which could use a little work, by the way, if you have a volunteer to go to Bolivia. They have seen biological controls replacing over 400,000 pounds of chemical products, what they call agrotóxicos, in over 500,000 hectares throughout Bolivia. So tremendously successful work that we've done there, impact that is sustainable and long-lasting over all these years. And thanks especially to Jeff for his tremendous work there on that project as well. And we worked a lot also throughout the country in ecotourism projects, and one of these was in the Salar de Uyuni. Alan Robinson was our volunteer that worked in these projects on an eco lodge and ecotourism circuit development. I know Alan is with us this morning because I talked to him last night. And I just want to underscore that that's another part of this great program, is that these lasting friendships, dating back for me to many years ago, still hold to this day. So really do value the friendships that I've formed with the volunteers, with our counterparts, and with others. I want to thank personally and directly here Jeff and Alan, you two volunteers who came to Bolivia, but all the other volunteers here that are listening in. Thank you for your service, and thank you for sharing your expertise and helping make these programs successful. They are by far the best bang for the buck for USAID. We need more programs like this. So in my capacity now as NPCA president, not only do I advocate for funding for Peace Corps, I advocate for funding for these programs, such as USAID's Farmer-to-Farmer program. And I believe they're so important, not just for the work that we do abroad, but the work that we bring back home, the stories we tell, the experiences we share back here, helping Americans understand the world better from our perspective of working alongside our counterparts in those countries. Finally, I just want to say thank you, Charles Cox. You really embodied a lifetime commitment to the ideals of peace and friendship through volunteer service. I am just so grateful for all that Charles did for VOCA, for the Cooperative Development Program, for Farmer to Farmer, for me personally as my boss and as my counterpart. And we remember him so fondly and all the great things that he did, his jokes, his sarcasm, his delightful personality. But, really, it's the work that he did over all those years that had such an impact around the world and for which we're really appreciative. So thank you all for the opportunity to join you today. I love talking about Bolivia and Guatemala and volunteer programs in general, and the Peace Corps. So I'll drop my email there in the chat. If you want to chat with me sometime, just drop me a note and let me know. Thank you so much. Back to you, Olga.
Thank you. Thank you, Glenn, for this very thoughtful testimonial. And it's great to hear the impact that we've had in Latin America, and thank you for also supporting our volunteer vision. Thank you for joining us today. So the time machine takes us to 1985, when the first USAID Farmer to Farmer project was awarded to VOCA. After the fall of the Soviet Union, VOCA becomes the first USAID grantee to have a presence in Armenia, Kazakhstan, Russia, and Ukraine. Today, we're honored to have with us Paul Summers, a food security advisor and former country director for Armenia and chief of party in Armenia. He was also co-founder and co-chairman of VISTA, a legacy organization that is now a subcontractor and implementing partner for us in Armenia on the Farmer to Farmer project. Paul is actually an active volunteer himself, and he recently conducted a Farmer to Farmer assignment. Co-presenting with Paul is someone who really does not need an introduction, our own senior director, Art Gandilyan, who was also country director in Armenia and co-founder and co-chairman of VISTA. Art and Paul will talk about the role of volunteers in the post-Soviet transformation in the newly independent states, or the NIS. Welcome, Art and Paul.
Hey, welcome everybody. My name is Art Gandilyan. As Ola said, I'm a senior director at ACDI VOCA here in Washington, DC. But my first professional job was in Armenia in 1990s. And in the next 10 minutes or so, my former colleague and friend Paul Summers and I are going to share with you our personal stories from those early farmer to farmer days. Now imagine Armenia 1993. No electricity, no water, economy in ruins after collapse of Soviet Union and the war with Azerbaijan. VOCA becomes one of the first international organizations in the country, and it was hard to even imagine where to start. In 1993, USAID and US Embassy in Yerevan asked us to make a sort of inventory of agricultural situation, kind of assessments to see what are the needs and challenges and opportunities in agricultural sector in the country. Ambassador Gilmer and USAID Director Susan Olds at that time proposed that we implement sort of massive volunteer attack to visit each region and to provide USAID with specific situation about each region and agricultural challenges and opportunities. There were 39 regions in Armenia at that time. So we organized 22 volunteer assignments where some volunteers cover several regions all at the same time. Now imagine we are meeting 22 volunteers at the airport, 22 cars with drivers, and 22 interpreters lined up in front of the office ready to take off. We also arranged host families in the regions to host a volunteer driver translator. That was quite an event. This assessment was one of the first efforts of that sort, and that laid ground for many other programs by us and by many other international organizations that followed. But that first initial scene at the airport will always be in my mind. I will now pass it over to Paul to continue with the talk about more substantial programs that followed. Paul, over to you.
Okay, thanks, Art. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, well, continuing on from Art's very vivid description of Armenia in those days, my farmer-to-farmer Armenian journey started in complete darkness in February 1994, when the Armenian Airlines pilot announces that we are landing immediately. I look out the window and I saw no lights on anywhere. I looked through the pilot door that was open in those days and I saw no runway lights. I couldn't figure out what's going on. Where are we landing? Then, with about 30 seconds or so left to land, the runway lights, they came on, and we touched down in the freezing winter. I said to myself, okay, welcome to Armenia. Some 3 years later, the Farmer-to-Farmer program had truly played a major role in the agriculture transformation process of newly independent Armenia. I knew from previous experience as a project manager in different parts of the world that a country does not really develop from outside expertise. It must develop from within. Expats, we can play a role in developing local capacity and providing global experiences and insights, just like what the Farmer-to-Farmer program does. But sustainable development has to come from local folks. So from day one as the Farmer-to-Farmer director, I made it clear to the staff that I would be building their capacity to develop meaningful programs that would really impact the future of Armenia. So with our capable staff, led by Art, coupled with very ambitious, independent supply chain participants, we based our Farmer-to-Farmer program on the reality at that time, which was that Armenia was living in a post-carbon dependent world. No electricity, as Art said, no more natural gas, limited and very poor quality gasoline. Water was also hit and miss, and also there was no such thing as credit for agriculture at that time. So you have an idea of the program environment that we faced. So to me, it was very clear this meant only one thing, that any farmer-to-farmer assignment along the supply chain had to promote the use of Armenia's natural and renewable resources and build on what was already there as Armenia was at war and completely blockaded. We knew at the time in the 1990s that our farmer-to-farmer renewable resources, or I should say, who knew at that time in the 1990s that our farmer-to-farmer renewable resource, zero carbon strategy, and local capacity building would be front and center themes in the development world today. VOCA's approach of linking strategic farmer-to-farmer expertise in renewable resources and business planning played a big role in successfully helping to launch agribusinesses that were started in the 1990s and that continue to this day. A couple of examples include the Urani winery that sells its wine throughout the former Soviet Union, Western Europe and the US, grape leaves that are exported to the United States, Europe, and the former Soviet Union, as well as sun-dried fruit and nut gift packages that are popular with tourists and are sold internationally, as well as varietal cheeses and other items. Now, along the theme of building up capacity from within Armenia, the Farmer-to-Farmer program also helped launch VISTA in 1995. Known as Local VOCA, it continues today as Armenia's first private agricultural service organization. The founder of CARD, Center for Agriculture and Rural Development, was also a former staff member of the Farmer-to-Farmer program. And CARD today provides top quality commercial products and services throughout Armenia. Of course, this renewable resource value chain strategy would not have gone anywhere without the nearly 90+ volunteers that came to Armenia during my 3 years. These volunteers, working under extreme hardship conditions, were placed strategically throughout the supply chain. Some of the volunteers had multiple assignments over that time, working with the same enterprise to make sure the Farmer-to-Farmer program did its part to make those key pioneering companies successful. One example I'd like to share is the Urani winery story. It was on my first trip south when we passed a little village called Areni. Standing there was a gentleman in a vicious snowstorm, freezing, with 3 or 4 bottles of wine by his feet. I asked Art to stop the car. I bought the wine and we talked to the fellow. He said they had a small cooperative winery in the village during Soviet time, but it was now closed. And while they knew how to make wine and they had privatized it, it was no longer working. Well, this stop in the snowstorm turned out to be one of our main farmer-to-farmer projects to help restart the wine sector. We agreed with the client that farmer-to-farmer would provide a series of volunteers in the quality assurance, kind of technical aspects of winemaking, along with marketing and business planning. So over the next 3 years, we had multiple experts that lived in the village, again, under hardship conditions, working with folks that were eager to get going. I'd like to share the names of just a couple of them who served on the Irani initiative because they were outstanding volunteers, as they truly showed what farmer-to-farmer program is all about. Our main technical wine expert was Professor Hani Khalil, now deceased, from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. Now, Hani was a food science professor, so he understood so many of the natural processes and quality assurance issues needed by our clients, including the fermentation of wine, but also with solar drying of fruits, the brining of grape leaves, and of cheeses. We had Willis Brown, a true marketing talent. Willis designed Armenia's first wine label and organized multiple wine tasting events in Yerevan. Some 28 years later, Willis continues to provide his expertise to Armenia today. We had Charles Baumann, who helped write an initial business plan for the Irani winery. Now, Charles was an interesting volunteer in that this was his very first assignment. His previous job was the president of Dole Foods. I remember asking Charles at one point why he would volunteer to work in extreme hardship conditions with no light, no heat, in an isolated village after being the president of one of the biggest corporations in the United States. He said, "Paul, because that's where I started. Yes, I retired president of Dole Foods, but I started by working with farmers like the Irani folks and helping them develop their business plan. And that's what I love most." Finally, there was a volunteer couple who undertook perhaps the most complicated and meaningful project during my time. Dottie and Kit Carpenter from California's San Joaquin Valley were irrigation specialists. They performed multiple assignments, designing and constructing a very complicated gravity flow irrigation system for war refugees. The UN High Commission for Refugees provided the funding for the materials. This couple lived with a refugee family, again, under extreme hardship conditions high in the Caucasus Mountains. Once completed, their efforts really did transform the lives of the community, providing clean drinking water and water for irrigating their crops. And the gravity flow system remains operational today. I think I'll stop there. I think I ran over a little bit of time, but thank you very much.
No, this was great, Paul and Art. Thank you so much. Well, those pictures of Armenia in the 90s really brought up some memories for me. Russia looked very similar at that time. Speaking of before and after, just look at all these beautiful photos from Armenia and some of the products that our volunteers helped to develop. So thank you so much, Paul and Art, for your presentation. So our journey continues. Journey through time continues. In 1997, VOCA merged with ACDI to become what we now know ACDI VOCA. Farmer to Farmer continues to be the flagship volunteer program, but we're also starting to venture into new and innovative partnerships around that time. One of them, the Mars Ambassador Program, is more well known to this audience. So today, I actually wanted to share some information about another important partnership, the partnership with the Quality Coffee Institute, called the Coffee Corps. And who better to talk about it than Diana Roach, former Senior Director of Volunteer Programs here at ACDI Avoca, who also previously served as volunteer recruiter, regional recruiter, and finally manager of the Columbus Regional Office. Diana is now happily retired, but she agreed to come back today and share with us her experience running the Coffee Corps initiative. Welcome, Diana.
Well, thank you, Olya. It's just such an honor to be here with all of you today. Glenn, you took most of the words out of my mouth about our volunteers, how wonderful and special they are. I'm so glad so many of you have joined today. I also appreciate former staff that have joined, and hats off to my former supervisors, Bob Cohen, George Rowland, and Bob Fries. I don't know if you're on, but if you are, hi to you too. As Olya said, you know, a lot of the work with the volunteer program has been done, excuse me, with farmer to farmer, but we did have a few pretty successful ventures with private entities. And so I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Coffee Corps, since that's not quite as well known. And it was a while ago. It was in 2003 to 2005. You know, during the 50 years of this historic volunteer program, we have kind of two common threads that have gone through the years. One of them, of course, is our work in cooperative development. And a lot of that was, yes, through farmer to farmer, but also through the CDP, or Cooperative Development Program, as well. And we did work in co-op development. You know, we've done that all over the world, and we will continue that. The other thread, of course, is ag production. And that's evidenced by what you heard both Glenn and Paul talk about. And as many of you know, that's a good majority of our work in farmer to farmer. But we also did work in ag production in coffee. And that started in Ethiopia in 1994. Now, the Coffee Quality Institute, whose job is to ensure good quality specialty coffee being offered to customers all over, they became aware of our production work in Ethiopia and other Latin American and African countries where we were working. And because of that, they also then became aware of our volunteer program. And they came and asked to learn more about it. The result of that was that we partnered with them for what they developed as the Coffee Corps. Now, the Coffee Corps had two components, and you can see them on this slide. The worldwide component was the result of a public-private partnership with USAID. And then the Central American component was more private funds. Putting all those together, and you can see we had about 80 assignments over the 2-year period. By the way, Coffee Corps does continue today on a much smaller scale because they don't have the public funding as a component, but they still run this program with a handful of volunteers going every year. The purpose of this program, and the reason they wanted to start this, was at the time, and this was in, I think, 2002, when this idea was developed by CQI, the purpose was to look for new sources of high quality coffee. The specialty coffee industry had, shall we say, exploded, thanks to Starbucks, of course. And because of that, there was, they needed to find a new source of product. So they decided that this would be a good way to try and do that. And they wanted to look for new sources of coffee and also to strengthen some existing ones. Now, many of the countries selected that you see here on the map also matched countries where we had a presence. And if it was a situation where we did not have a presence, we called on our regional office support, And of course, they stepped in and helped as they needed to. ACDI VOCA was responsible for developing viable scopes of work, for preparing, on the ground, receiving the volunteer and managing the on the ground logistics, also helping us in the volunteer program be in touch with the host organization there. Now, the volunteer program side, we developed briefing materials specifically for this program. And of course, as we always have for volunteers who travel overseas, we handled all the travel arrangements and, did all the briefings and supplied support that way. The assignments focused on areas you might, make sense, of course: production, processing, cupping, and marketing. If we could see the next slide, that would be great. Thanks, Olya. You'll see a picture in the upper left corner there of cupping. That's a way of determining the quality of the coffee and if it meets certain standards set up by a Coffee Quality Institute. And we had people coming and doing these assignments from some of our largest coffee companies in the United States. For example, Pete's Coffee, Green Mountain, Caribou, and also Sara Lee. Now, what was interesting was the gentleman who did the assignment from Sara Lee at that time, after his assignment, he was offered an opportunity by Dunkin' Donuts to go and develop their coffee sector. And I don't need to tell you what happened after that, because you can buy it in the grocery store now. So, and just to kind of give you an idea of one of our most unusual assignments, I don't know if you noticed, but on the map, there was a dot in Papua New Guinea. Now, that's not been a normal destination for our development work. Not to say it shouldn't be, but also hasn't been a destination for our volunteer program. But Coffee Corps, saw an opportunity there to seek out some new coffee sources, and they were in touch with the cooperative there, or maybe the cooperative reached out to them. That could be how it happened. So anyway, we sent this volunteer there with support from regional office, I believe in the Philippines, by the way. The volunteer lands in this small plane in Papua New Guinea. He opens the door to the plane and starts to go down the steps. And here in front of him is an entire community of the local community dressed in tribal attire with face paint, spears, and the whole regalia. Now, put yourself in that volunteer's shoes, and what would you think? Because need I remind you, Papua New Guinea is a known country for cannibalism. So this volunteer's thinking, okay. Anyway, brave as he was, he took it as, this is the culture, this is local. I hope they're just greeting me. And of course, that's what they were doing. They were so excited to have somebody come and help them. From the words of the leader of the cooperative, he said, "Nobody has ever come to help us. You are the first." And he did help them. He worked with them on their production, but mostly on their processing, which then led to some good marketing. So it was a very successful venture. And but I'll never forget the pictures that came back from it. I'm just sorry we couldn't find them. Now, what's come out of this is our continued and strong relationship with CQI. Yes, this ended in 2005, but since then, and thanks to a lot of the work by TJ Ryan on our staff, we have been able to continue this relationship with CQI, and it has then resulted in strengthening our work in coffee in many locations around the world. Today, for example, we have what happens to be TJ's project in the Philippines, Phil Cafe. And we work with CQI there. And that project, even though we haven't been able to do things the way we've wanted to for the past year or so because of COVID, the project is going well and they've had some good successes. So I'd have to say that even though this was many years ago, there is a lasting, imprint that it's made, not just with the volunteer program, but more importantly with ACDI Voca's coffee work around the world. And please know, I may be retired, and but I was with this program for a long time, 21 years. It's no less dear to my heart, and it will always remain so. And it's such a joy to see all of you joining us today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diana. We do miss you, and I really appreciate you coming to this event and sharing these wonderful stories, and I hope that we can do that again soon. Thank you so much for joining us. And what a great segue into the next section of our presentation. We're back to the timeline, but we're really making a connection to the present and the future here. I want to highlight the role that volunteer programs have played in expanding the ACDI Voca footprint. Because of the success of the Farmer to Farmer program, associate awards were launched in multiple countries: Bangladesh, Ghana, Indonesia, Jamaica, Lebanon, Liberia, Mali, and Tanzania. Between 2001 and 2018, volunteers were also major contributors to the successful Cooperative Development, or CDP, program in Ethiopia, Kenya, Liberia, Paraguay, and Tanzania. And this brings us to today. This year, ACDI Voca rejoined the Cooperative Development Program with new activities in Guinea and the Philippines. So I would like to invite to this virtual podium our own Thelonious Trammell, Senior Director, whose career with ACDI Voca spans 20 years. A former Chief of Party in Peru, Liberia, and the Philippines, Thelonious is now the Director of the CDP and Farmer to Farmer programs. He himself was also a Peace Corps volunteer in Honduras. So Thelonious, take it away.
Well, thank you, Olia. Yeah, no, just to echo what Diana just mentioned, it's great to see some faces that have been associated with ACDI Voca for many years, both on the volunteer side and on the staffing side, and so it just yeah, it's very nice to hear a lot of these stories and know the good work that we have done over the years. As Olia mentioned. In 2000 and really 2008, fiscal year 2009 is when USAID really converted the Farmer to Farmer program to an LWA, which allowed the program to really expand into new areas and develop new programs with volunteerism as a core element of those new programs. And as a result of that conversion of the Farmer to Farmer program into an LWA, we were able to develop a series of different programs in a variety of different types of programs, both Feed the Future programs, like the program in Tanzania, NAFACA, or the Feed the Future program Advance in Ghana. And then we also had biodiversity programs, farmer to farmer programs in Jamaica, and then hydroponics in Lebanon, and then other programs throughout West Africa. And so, the farmer to farmer LWA really allows and continues to allow the kind of growth of the farmer to farmer volunteerism worldwide. Along those same lines, as Oli had mentioned, ACDI Voca worked with CDP in multiple countries for many years. It was originally, really, the CDP program was originally a program focused on building out the capacity of ACDI Voca to provide services worldwide, and it grew into in 2001 to more of an external program where we worked in a series of different countries: Ethiopia, Kenya, Liberia, Paraguay, and Tanzania and others. And in the case of Paraguay, I always remember some of the gender-related work that we developed. A lot of our current gender kind of inclusion activities really came out of some of the CDP work in Paraguay, and we recently in 2008, or kind of our last 2018 was our last CDP related program, and then just more recently we were able to join back into CDP, and we've able to establish programs in Guinea and the Philippines, and then we have kind of an additional element which is focused on multiple countries doing assessment, CDP cooperative development assessments, and there we have quite a few volunteers built into these programs to add value and deepen the experience. And I think the critical piece that I think Glenn and others have highlighted is that those long-term connections that are developed through volunteers and their connections back to the host organization in each country. Those relationships continue long after the programs have ended. And I think even just this event is a kind of a testament to a lot of that, everybody coming together and that shared experience and keeping the knowledge and spreading the knowledge beyond the specific activity. And so, yeah, it's great to be associated with ACD Avoca, the Farmer to Farmer program, the CDP program, and volunteers. And and this is, and it continues. And I think that's a critical piece, is that we have these new programs that are continuing, the Farmer to Farmer, expanding into new areas, and the CDP program now. And we very much look forward to the future and growing further the Farmer to Farmer and volunteerism overall. So thank you.
Thank you, Thelonious. Absolutely. And today, we only have so much time to really talk about the breadth of our volunteer programs, but we have volunteers in Kenya, Honduras, Bangladesh, here in the US. So the program is really successful and growing. And thank you, Thelonious, for your continuous support and leadership for the Farmer to Farmer project, but also volunteer programs in general. So really enjoy working with you. Thank you. And thank you for making this a special event as well. So I hope you enjoyed our journey through time and this brief retrospect of volunteer programs, past and present. One person who exemplifies the service and passion for volunteerism is Charles Cox. Several of you mentioned him today. He's a former senior staff member and volunteer champion who passed away this year. We would like to use this opportunity to celebrate his life and honor his memory with a special tribute. I will turn the floor over to Diana Shipman, Director of Volunteer Programs, who knew Charles personally. Diana?
Thank you, Olia. For those of you who did not have the opportunity to meet Charles or to know him well, he was a longstanding and integral staff member at ACDI Avoca for 33 years. He started as the Avoca representative to Africa and the Middle East and Brazil in 1977, and advanced to Vice President for Operations in 1981, and then Vice President for European Programs in 1990. By 1995, he was Vice President for Global Operations, and in 1997, he became the Regional Vice President and later Senior Vice President for Latin America and Caribbean programs at ACDI Avoca until he retired. Charles was a citizen of the world. He started his career teaching history and social studies classes in France, and later spent 2 years in Ecuador as a Peace Corps volunteer for urban community development, before continuing as Regional Director for Peace Corps Brazil. Due to these experiences, he became fluent in French, Spanish, and Portuguese, which served him well as he traveled to so many countries that his passports were full of extra pages for visas and stamps, that the pages hung down to the floor when you opened them completely. And for every one of those countries, he had a story, often an outrageous story. For those who knew Charles, perhaps the best way to describe him would be to say, Charles was a character. He had a larger-than-life personality and was always ready with witty wordplay or a funny joke. He enjoyed connecting with people because it gave him a great deal of satisfaction to know that he had brought a smile to someone's face, made someone laugh, or helped them look at something in a different way. One example of this was his signing of informal emails to sarcastically summarize their content. Yours, episodically, Charles Carrington, clearly on a roll, CCC. Or yours, illuminatingly, Charles Carrington, covering much confusion, CCC. He was a wonderful storyteller. He loved to share a funny anecdote whenever the occasion presented itself, but he was also well-versed in much of the history and current events happening around the world. He was fascinating to talk to and always had something to contribute to any conversation, no matter the topic. Perhaps the most endearing trait about Charles was his humanity. Every day, he showed that it is our connections to one another that matter. He made time to socialize with colleagues and created opportunities for gatherings to ensue for that very purpose. Whether it was in his office on a Friday afternoon, at a happy hour at a local restaurant like my brother's place or the Irish Times before running off to catch his bus, at a company softball game, by creating biannual reunions after his retirement, or his spirited grammar and story vignettes that he shared via email. He reminded us that while work was important, it was more important to build relationships with each other and to find connections with one another. He made us feel like family. Finally, Charles had a very big heart and really cared about the work that he did and how our company could help improve the livelihoods of people all over the world. He often liked to remind us that we were working for the people all over the world. He supported volunteer programs as a regular presence at volunteer events and worked hard to expand volunteer opportunities by way of new projects. He believed in our work so much that after he retired, he volunteered with us in Paraguay with the Cooperative Development Program in 2014. In honor of his remarkable life and his unending support of volunteer programs, I am pleased to announce the new Charles Cox Excellence in Volunteerism Awards. These awards will recognize exceptional volunteers from across all ACDI VOCA projects around the world. Today, I'm excited to welcome his wife, Judy, and his daughter, Nicole, to help us announce the first 5 volunteer recipients of this award. Judy, you are welcome to turn on your camera if you're comfortable. And Nicole, I'm not seeing, I know you're here, but I'm not seeing you.
Hello, hello.
Hi.
Hi. Mom, do you need help? Oh dear.
Wow.
Well, maybe I can pinch hit for Mom until she can jump on.
That would be fine. That would be fine.
Good morning, everyone. It's such an honor to be here. I'm not going to go off script too much, but I do want to say, I know some of you probably remember me from when I was small or heard stories about me. Pay no attention to any, you know how he exaggerates. So I take responsibility for nothing. And I speak on behalf of myself and my sister, but he would be beyond honored and touched. I know that this work was the passion of his life and that it was so important to him that he felt he made a difference and that he had some kind of impact on the world. I think that he really, really wanted to know that his life had some meaning. So thank you all. I'm so honored and touched to be here. And I will I was kind of stalling for Mom, but here we go.
Well, excuse me for interrupting. Nicole, excuse me for interrupting.
Hi.
Oh, hi. I'm so sorry. I was having technical difficulties, but I finally was able to get to you all on my phone. And I would like to say, first of all, thank you so much for honoring Charles in this way. I know he would be beyond thrilled. And I want to believe that he's here watching all of us now. Thank you so much. For the category of regional volunteer, we are excited to recognize Mr. Bernard Cujo. Bernard worked remotely with the Zambia EDGE program to train 8 small and medium enterprises in business skills, such as bookkeeping, business planning, and financial modeling to help them be more competitive and better positioned to grow their businesses. Additionally, Bernard exemplified the volunteer spirit when he extended his 3-month to 7 months assignment, thanks to his generous and giving character. To learn more about Bernard, please visit the ACDI Voca website. And next, I would like to say for the category of remote volunteer, we are excited to recognize Mr. Camille Assad. Camille worked remotely over 3 months last summer as an impact investment volunteer with AV Ventures, an investment management subsidiary of ACDI Voca. Camille worked closely with staff in Ghana who managed the West Africa Fund, where he streamlined the portfolio monitoring process and built a portfolio monitoring workbook, which now provides AV Ventures with a consolidated tool and a comprehensive and standardized and can be used with each regional fund. To learn more about Camille, please visit the ACDI Voca website. Thank you.
Good job, Judy.
Well, I finally got in.
Okay, next we have, I'm so excited for the category of local volunteer. We're all excited to recognize Mr. Kabita. Zambian financial specialist. Kabita trained and mentored 27 small and medium enterprises, SMEs, in business management skills, business planning, and financial management, both online and in person, over 7 months. Thanks to his trainings, the SMEs are better able to keep their businesses healthy and thriving and have improved their chances of receiving small loans or grants to expand their businesses. To learn more about his assignment, please visit the ACDI Voca website. And drum roll, for the category of volunteer impact, we are excited to recognize Mr. Mark Wade and Ms. Masuda Khan Mambatova. Mark and Masuda collaborated on 2 assignments with 4 women's groups in Kyrgyzstan to provide training on packaging and marketing of local fruits and vegetables to 209 participants. After the trainings, the women's groups were inspired to join efforts by establishing a cooperative. They utilized new labels and brands for their products, extended advertising to social media, and utilized a community building to establish a permanent store for selling their products. Woo! Additionally, after their assignments, Mark generously donated $600 to the women's groups to purchase 6 vacuum sealers and 2 food dehydrators, which allow the women to produce dried food and packaged food more quickly and more efficiently. To learn more about their assignments, please visit the ACDI Voca website, and congratulations to all the winners of the Charles Cox Excellence in Volunteerism Awards for 2021.
Yay, thank you. Thank you so much to Diana for just an incredible tribute. such heartfelt words, and for Charles's family, obviously, for being here and joining with us the celebration of his life and his accomplishments. And so happy that we will institutionalize his memory by having these awards every year and recognizing our excellent volunteers from around the world. So thank you so much. Thank you, and congratulations to the volunteers. So, wow, what a great way to look back at some memories, but also at the present and the future, and celebrate our volunteer programs. I'm so honored to be a part of these programs, and just listening to all of our speakers and volunteers, and all of you, commenting today. It's just made me so happy that we have this incredible program as part of ACDI VOCA DNA and legacy. And thank you for all our speakers. Thank you to all of you who participated today. I hope you enjoyed this and you were inspired by this as much as I was. We look forward to 50 more years of impact and service. So thank you so much for joining, and goodbye.
gift of memory. May our minds and hearts be filled with the wonderful